really pleased to have Jacqui Murphy here from Tech Capital Partners. Jacqui is a partner in the firm, and she focuses specifically on investment opportunities in new media, internet, wireless, and communications technology. So right, of course, in the areas that we like to focus on here at Velocity. And prior to joining Tech Capital, she was in marketing at both Cisco Systems and at Pick Street. And she's been a marketing consultant and instructed business courses at Western, in their School of Business, and at Laurier. Holds a Bachelor of Business Administration from Laurier. We're not going to hold that.
I married a guy from UW. Does that count?
Yeah, that counts. And she's completed programs at Harvard and MIT in entrepreneurship and venture capital. She's here to give a talk on an important topic with respect to venture capital. So, Jacqui, take it away.
Thank you. Okay, so mic or no mic? Can you hear me at the back? Yeah. Just fine? Okay. I'd rather no mic, but
I'll leave it here in case
if you can't hear me, just yell at me and I'll grab the mic. So just a quick survey, just so I know where everybody's coming from before I get started. How many people have heard the term venture capital before? Okay, how many know something about venture capital, other than just the words venture capital? Oh, that's pretty good, okay. There's a knowledgeable audience. How many people know more than just a little bit about venture capital? Okay, good, perfect. I think I've tailored my talk appropriately then. So what I want to do is tell you a little bit about Tech Capital, and then also talk a little bit about venture capital and entrepreneurs who should be pursuing venture capital as opposed to entrepreneurs who shouldn't be pursuing venture capital. So hopefully by the end of today, you'll have a basic understanding of what venture capital is, and you'll have a sense for whether or not this is an avenue that you want to pursue as an entrepreneur, or whether you want to go with other forms of financing. So I also have a hard stop at about 2 o'clock. So if you have questions, please interrupt me and ask them throughout the presentation. And I also put a little stack of business cards here. So if you don't get a chance to ask me a question during the presentation, or if you want to ask me something confidentially, feel free to just shoot me an email or give me a call post-presentation, and I'll be happy to answer whatever questions you have. Any questions before we get started? All right. So primer on venture capital. So quickly on Tech Capital, we call ourselves the local venture capital firm. We're based in Waterloo Region. We're the only venture capital firm based in Waterloo Region. We invested in Kevin Tour. So when you hear from Kevin Tour, he can tell you what we're really like. We have been in the region since 2001 formally. We had our first fund, though, started in 1999, a fund called Waterloo Ventures. And that invested in a few companies before Tech Capital itself was actually formed. So we've been in this region for a long time. We work with venture capital firms from all over the world. We've worked with folks from Israel, folks from the US, and then, of course, all of the Canadian venture capital firms as well. So pretty good breadth of network, but based here in Waterloo. And a lot of people talk about Toronto versus Waterloo, and it seems very close, but in venture capital world, it's actually quite far away. So when we talk about venture capital, we talk about concentric circles. And for a venture capitalist, you typically try to position your firm in an area where you think there are going to be a significant amount of deals. You want to be close to your entrepreneurs, especially if you're investing at a seed or early stage of a company's development. So we at Tech Capital invest at the seed stage, very early stage, and then we invest throughout the life cycle of a company. So we've positioned ourselves in Waterloo because we believe there's a significant amount of deal flow in Waterloo, and most of our investments have been here so far. As you get farther and farther away, it becomes more and more difficult as a venture capital firm to get to know your entrepreneurs, to get to know the employees at your companies, to provide any kind of assistance that they need. I mean, we like to say, if you need toilet paper, call us, we'll go get you toilet paper. I mean, we're really hands-on, very involved. So if you're working with a VC from Toronto, they have to drive for an hour and a half to get you toilet paper, which is a little bit more difficult than a local VC. So when you're talking to a venture capital firm, it's a lot easier to attract money from a local venture capital firm as opposed to a venture capital firm that's farther away. Just an FYI. We're currently investing our second fund, or third fund if you count the Waterloo Ventures Fund. It's a $60 million fund. So all in, we manage $95 million in the Waterloo region. And we have invested in 14 companies to date over the last 7 years. So pretty good breadth of technology that we've invested in so far, everything from chip type companies through to Web 2.0 type companies, enterprise software. We have a clean tech investment out of Toronto. Pretty much all IT we would consider except for biotech, medical devices. Clean tech is fairly new for us, but we will consider investments in that space. So mobile is an area that we're very interested in. We've made a couple of mobile investments, and I'll talk about those in a bit. This is our team. So 3 partners. We have an investment associate who does all of the work. And then we have another thing that's different about tech capital that you might not see in other venture capital firms. Some US firms do this as well, but they actually invest in operational resources to help your company. So when you're talking to a venture capital firm, make sure you ask them what types of things that they do for you other than provide money. Anybody can provide money, but it's the services that you can access on top of that money that sometimes make all the difference. So we now have 2 full-time folks focused on the HR aspect of our portfolio companies. Suzanne works with the portfolio company CEOs and senior executives to develop HR strategies, make sure that there are good benefit plans for the employees, anything to do with hiring, termination, health and safety, those types of things that you might not necessarily think about when you're first getting started as an entrepreneur. As you start to grow your team and start to have employees, these are things that become incredibly important. And about 80% of the money that we invest in companies actually goes directly through to employees through salaries or through benefit plans and that kind of thing. So we've chosen to invest a good chunk of resources in providing free HR support for our portfolio companies, just so that they can have a little bit more support in that area. And then Natalie does full-time recruiting for our portfolio companies. So if any of you are deciding that maybe entrepreneurship isn't for you and you want to get a job at a kick-ass portfolio company, Natalie is the person to call. So again, access to amazing talent is a real challenge for technology companies. So we've found that by having a full-time dedicated HR resource focused on recruiting has really helped our portfolio companies. And these are our companies. The 2 that are in the wireless space are Avasi and, so Avasi's here in the middle, and Metronome. There they are. I had to think about that for a second. That's horrible. So both companies are fairly new investments for us. Metronome was founded by a couple of guys from RIM, and Avasi was founded by the guys that we invested in Video Locus. So they're serial entrepreneurs and doing it again. So both very exciting investments. The other companies are also exciting, but not focused on the wireless space. So not sure how interested most of you will be in that. Perhaps, if you are, give me a call. All right, so financing options. So at this point, I'm assuming most of you are aspiring entrepreneurs. Probably some of you have started things, but you're still students for the most part. Is that right? Yeah, so financing will become probably more important to you once you leave school and start your businesses full-time, have to pay the bills and pay your employees and that kind of thing. So there are a number of different financing options. And the environment right now is actually very interesting as well in Canada, in the US, and the rest of the world, obviously. I think you guys are probably hearing a lot about what's going on in the economy. So the whole financial market is absolutely contracting, and it's becoming a lot harder to raise financing, especially for very risky opportunities, things like venture capital, things like startup technology companies. So I'll talk about that a little bit more as well. So 3 ways to finance the growth of your companies: equity, debt, profits. Profits, profits, profits. The best way to finance your companies. If you can bootstrap and do it by yourself, take a little bit longer, but do it with profits, real customers, real revenues, real profits, I absolutely encourage you to do that. Okay? You retain all the power, you are the boss. It depends on the type of entrepreneur you are, but if you want to be completely in control of the ultimate destiny of your company, profits are the way to go. Government programs, I've put there in brackets. There are some government programs that you can access for financing your company. They, again, are very difficult to get money from. If you're connected to universities, there are things like the Ontario Centres of Excellence that can provide some funding. IRAP, Industrial Research Assistance Program, can provide some funding. Kevin might also be able to talk about some other government programs that you can access. But just to give you some color on what's going on in government these days, a lot of the programs, their funds are drying up. Governments don't have a lot of money, and so we're sort of in this holding period as the money is being allocated and divvied out into these government programs. So by the time you guys graduate, it might be a completely different economy out there and a lot more opportunity. But be very careful about the government programs that you decide to pursue. I've had more than one conversation with entrepreneurs who have spent tons and tons of hours filling out government forms, only to be told, the government program has been canceled or whatnot. So you just want to make sure that you do a little bit of due diligence on the program before you pursue that opportunity. Equity is venture capital and other forms of equity, which we can talk about as well. And then debt, of course, you guys all know about debt if you're anything like I was when I was going through school. Okay, so typically you'll see as a company, if you decide to pursue venture capital, you'll see common shares, preferred shares, or subordinated debt. So common shares is the type of investment vehicle we like to use at Tech Capital. Essentially, it's the same type of shares that you would get as an entrepreneur. So the venture capital firm and the entrepreneur all hold the same class of shares. And we like to do that because we like to be able to come to you and say, look, this is a really good decision. We believe that this is a good decision, and then you can trust us because we hold the same kind of shares that you hold, right? So we're at parity with you. When you start working with venture capital firms, and we do preferred share deals as well. If we syndicate a deal and we work with another venture capital firm, we will do preferred share deals. And that essentially means that their shares ride on top of your shares, so they get paid out first. If there's enough money for everybody, then it's irrelevant. Okay? But if there's only enough money for the preferred shareholders, when you sell your company, they get their money and you don't get anything. So just something to think about. Okay? You want to think about not just about the amount of money that you're being given, but also the way that the deal is structured, the type of shares, the conditions on the shares, those types of things. So debt, we've talked about. Equity is we all share a piece of the pie. So you really have to believe in the venture capital firm that you're partnering with. You have to be willing to share with them ownership of the company, decision-making power within the company. It's more of a partnership as opposed to debt. You're depending on how things go, you're at the mercy of your debt holders, or you just pay off your debt and you go on your merry way. Okay, so what makes us tick? Where are we coming from? It's really important to know, don't know if any of you have taken marketing courses, but this is sort of marketing 101, who your audience is. Okay, so you go to pitch a venture capital firm, what do they care about? Okay, so we are ultimately accountable to limited partners. And limited partners are, in Canada, the big pension funds. So the Ontario Municipal Retirement Pension Fund, Teachers Pension Fund, Canada Pension Fund. So ultimately, you guys are actually investors in Tech Capital through things like Canada Pension Fund. So we're accountable to these limited partners who are then accountable to their stakeholders. And so ultimately, what we care about, deep down, dark, don't necessarily talk about this very often, is we just want to make a return for our shareholders. Okay, so to us, it's all about making money. We love you. We love your business concepts. We love your ideas. But at the end of the day, our job is to make money for our limited partners. Okay, so don't lose sight of that fact. We also all have specific fund mandates. So at Tech Capital, our mandate is to invest in early stage technology companies in the Waterloo region. And we do life cycle investing, so we invest through the life cycle of that technology company. And we don't do biotech or medical devices. So IT is primarily our focus. So if you fall within that bucket, then we would be a good venture capital firm to approach. What we often see is people who take their business concept pitch and they just send it out to everybody. And it's very obvious that they've sent it out to everybody because they haven't taken the time to go to your website and understand who you are as a venture capital firm, because they're a dating site in China. Okay? And we don't do dating sites and we don't invest in China, but yet they say, we went to your website, we know exactly what your mandate is, we think our investment would be absolutely perfect for your fund. And you think, obviously this person didn't do their research. So it's very easy for us to tell if you've done your research or not. So take the time, really only target 5, maybe 10 venture capital firms that fit your specific mandate and go after them hard. understand their mandate, look at their website, really understand them as people. A lot of venture capital firms, people within venture capital firms are blogging now. So you can follow them, you can learn what they care about, what they don't care about. You can approach them by saying, hey, I read your blog post the other day, and I think you might be interested in what we've been working on based on the fact that you said blah, 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 blah. And then right away they say, wow, here's a person who's taken the time to figure out who I am. Maybe I should take the time to figure out who they are. And yeah, maybe this deal is not for me, but this person sounds interesting. Maybe I want to get to know this person, and maybe when they're on their second or their third company, serial entrepreneur, they might be somebody that I invest in, right? So it's not just about the one pitch, build your network, take the time to build your network. We're willing to take risks, but we do everything we can to possibly mitigate that risk. So I talked a little bit about distance risk before, right? So if we are close to your company, then we mitigate that distance risk because we can see you all the time. We know if something's going off the rails because one of your employees has said something to one of our other portfolio company employees, and we hear about it in the grocery store, and so there's a little bit more of a communication that happens, and it's important to be in communication with your venture capital partners as much as you can, especially if they're involved at the early stage. But there are other risk factors, financial risk, and I'll talk about this again later on in the presentation. But right now, the risk of not being able to raise capital for our portfolio companies is very high. So there isn't a lot of money out there, and so financial risk is something that we think a lot about these days. All different types of risk, we try to mitigate it whenever possible. And then we're looking for companies who can become home runs. So when you're doing your market sizing, when you're looking at your companies, I think Gary Svoboda probably talked about this a little bit, trying to figure out how big your market is, did he? That would be something that he might cover off. If your entire market is about 50 million in revenue, we want to sell your company for more than that. It's going to be hard to sell your company for more than that if the entire industry is worth that, right? So if your industry is really a $1 billion or a $2 billion market, then there's some room in there for a few competitors. There might be some strategic partners that are big companies that at some point could acquire your company, or you could grow your company based on revenues to have enough revenues to go public, perhaps. I mean, going public these days is not a very common exit scenario. Certainly not like it was a few years ago. All right, so stages of company development. Again, when you're talking to venture capital firms, you want to identify what stage of development they invest in. So you're probably focused right now on the gray boxes, thinking about where your product is at, or even, you're probably still at the concept stage for most of you, perhaps, moving through eventually to having your first product and starting to take it to market. We suggest getting a first customer as part of that concept prototype first product phase, because then you're developing a real product that someone actually wants. And I can't tell you how many times we see people who come into our office and say to us, we've been working on this for 5 years. This is the greatest thing since sliced bread. You're going to absolutely love this. And they tell us the pitch, and we say, who's bought it? And they say, well, we haven't actually taken it out to market yet. We wanted to make sure that we had developed the product completely because we were worried that somebody might copy us if we talked to anybody about it. And so we haven't gone out to market with it yet. And so we say, okay, well, it's an interesting concept. We're going to make some phone calls and figure out if this is something that somebody might actually buy. We make a few phone calls, and everybody says, yeah, you know what? We have that, and we've had it for 3 years. Or, why would anybody want that? And then we have to go back to the entrepreneur who's been working on this for 5 years and say, you know how you've invested all that time and money in that product? Well, guess what? Okay, so if you get your first customer or second customer or third customer to help you with that development, even get them to put a bit of skin in the game, get them to be your first investor, get them to spend time working with you on the product to make sure that you've got all of the features that it needs. I mean, that is incredibly valuable advice. Okay? And then, you get into more customers later on. So from a venture capital perspective, we sort of divide ourselves up into these different chunks. Tech capital, we call ourselves institutional angels because we'll invest in goo on a bench. Okay, not often, but we've actually helped companies come up with their concept. Okay, so we'll invest in research that a professor is working on. we'll invest in companies that don't have an idea yet. So for example, Sandvine, one of our portfolio companies, was a group of people that we knew very well because we had worked with them at Pickstream. A couple of us had worked with them at Pickstream, and they had no idea what they were going to do. They had a group, they had a team. This was after exiting from Cisco, being let go from Cisco. And we loved the team. We wanted to keep the team together. So we said, you know what, we really don't care what your idea is. We know you guys are great. Here's $19 million. Figure it out. Okay, and we weren't the only venture capital firm to do that. There were 4 or 5 of us who came together to invest in that company. And they took the first couple of months to figure out what idea they were going to work on, and ended up having a very successful IPO. And we made a lot of money on our investment in Sandvine. So it's not always just the idea, it can be the people. Okay? But you have to have proven yourself to be able to get money with no idea. So that'll be when you guys are on business 3 or 4 or 5. You'll be able to get venture capital without an idea. So tech capital starts at the angel phase. There are a bunch of angels in the Waterloo region. You can access them through Kevin. We will do seed financing. There aren't a lot of venture capital firms that do seed financing in Canada. Fewer now than there were, maybe 2 or 3 at this point. And then early stage is sort of lumped in with seed now. And then once you get to Series A, B, C, there are a couple more in Canada. And the guys in the US won't talk to you until you have 10 million in revenue. And that's a broad generalization. Obviously, there are exceptions to that rule. But every time we talk to them, they say, how much do you have in revenue? We say 3 million. They say, yeah. Are you cash flow positive? We say no. They say, you know, why don't you come see us on your next round? Okay, so they're really looking to mitigate a lot of that financial risk.
Just talking to a few people, and this is sort of a hard question, they suggested that if you're going to go for VC, that you should always go to the States, just because VC firms in the States are much more open to risk, and whereas Canadian VCs will try to force you to exit earlier. What would you say to that?
It's a good question. It's a very good question. You've been paying attention. So would you be based in Waterloo, or would you be based?
Yeah, based in Waterloo.
Okay, not a chance. You'll never is a strong word, very slim chance that you will raise. And I can't advocate this because I would never want to encourage people to leave Canada or Waterloo region. I think that there's lots of opportunity to build great companies here, and great companies have been built here. There are a lot more venture capital firms in the Valley than in Waterloo. There's one here. There are some in Toronto, okay, but there are quite a few in the Valley. There are quite a few in Boston. There are a few in New York, right? So there are definitely pockets, right? But there are also a lot more entrepreneurs in the Valley that are competing for the attention of those VCs, right? So in Waterloo, we see 5, 6 deals a week. In the Valley, they see 100 deals a day, right? So in terms of bandwidth, in terms of attention, if you've got a good idea, if you've got a good team, if your opportunity is a compelling opportunity, you're going to get attention. You're going to get attention from Canadian VCs, you're going to get attention from US VCs. Okay? Now, the US VCs may ask you to relocate. If they're very interested in your business, they might ask you to relocate. I haven't known many Canadian entrepreneurs who have relocated to the Valley and have successfully raised financing and then successfully built a company in the Valley and then successfully exited. Like,
isn't that what Albert Law is doing? Like, wasn't he on TV saying that?
Has he exited?
Well, I don't know. He just moved to Scotland.
Yeah, Albert. Can I plead the fifth on that one? But it's hard to raise venture capital anywhere. You know, whether you're in the Valley, whether you're in Canada, it's just hard. And it's harder now than it was. It's also hard for venture capital firms to raise capital now because the limited partners are having some serious issues because of everything that's gone on in private equity. Okay, so Canadian VCs in terms of exiting fast, which was the second part of your question, I think people exit when there's an opportunity to exit. So for example, Video Locus, we invested, I think it was about $2 million in Video Locus, and we invested them in 2001. And in 2001, I don't know if any of you remember, was pretty horrible, bubble crashing, nightmarish type time of year, or time of financial cycles. And we put money into the company, and then when it came time to raise financing again, we went to every venture capital firm we could, Canada, US, nobody was putting money out. And LSI Logic came along and saw this fantastic technology and this great opportunity and bought the company for $10 million, 7 million US, 10 million Canadian. And it was a great exit for everybody. And we looked at the team and we thought, in order to get to the next stage, we need to become a chip. Right now, we have technology. We don't have it on a chip. And our team is a technology team. It's not a chip team. So do we want to take the risk in building a chip and exiting in a few years and only having one venture capital firm around the table, or do we all want to make a little bit of money? Right? It wasn't a home run, but it was a good exit, right? As opposed to Sandvine, who was 6-7 years before they exited and had a very successful public offering, and all of the venture capital firms continued to see progress and backed them all the way through until the company was ready for an exit. They chose the exit path and we went for it, right? So every company is different, every opportunity is different. Access to capital is a huge factor. You know, if you can't raise money for your company, you have to exit, right? So, and I think US VCs and Canadian VCs are all facing that pressure right now. So a little bit of a long-winded answer, but hopefully it got to the meat. Okay, so when is venture capital appropriate? Not every technology company needs venture capital. Everybody got that? You are not a failure if you don't get venture capital. In fact, some people might say you are a huge success for not taking venture capital. Ask yourself, what major problem does this technology solve? So all of you, as you're coming up with your concepts, I hope somebody has drilled this into your minds. Before you come up with an idea, make sure you're starting with a problem. Okay, here is a problem in the industry. I am fixing this problem with my technology in this way. Okay, so what major problem? We always look for major problems that you're solving. Can I create a product out of this technology? So it's great that you've developed great technology. How are you going to sell it? How are you going to bundle it? Is it going to be a chip? Is it going to be just licensed software? Is it going to be, you know, some kind of interactive web something or other? Okay, so what is the product actually going to be, and how are you going to be able to make money with that? Will anybody buy it? So go out to the market, talk to people, figure out if they'll buy it. Is this product compelling enough for people to change their behavior? Okay, so it's got to be really compelling for someone to switch from doing this every day to this every day, because this, especially in technology, can be painful. Okay, so think about how compelling your opportunity is. And then you've probably heard this reference before. You know, is it a painkiller or is it a vitamin? Is it a nice to have, or is it a, oh God, please develop this faster? Can you put more people on this problem because I need it tomorrow? I need it 2 weeks ago. And you want to be working on something that people are so desperate for that they'll pay $1 gazillion for it. You know, you have the opportunity to pick and choose what it is you're working on. Make sure you maximize your time and your effort. These are the things that we look for. Okay, so we look at the management team. We look to see if you have domain expertise, and by that I mean, do you have experience in the market in which you're going into? Okay, so we often say to students or people who are just at the early stages of their career that a great career path is to go and work for another technology company for a few years and learn on their dime. Okay, get a customer-facing role, product management or something like that, something that can use, you know, if you've got technical skills, your technical skills, and also somewhat customer-facing so that you get to know the market and the opportunities and the problems that are in that market. And then based on that, you've developed your domain expertise, so you really understand the market, you understand the problems in the market, and you have a Rolodex. You've met some folks in the market who can help you take your company to market. Okay? As an entrepreneur who has just finished school or is in school, your Rolodex is probably somewhat limited, and your business experience, your actual work experience is probably somewhat limited, so it might be difficult for you to attract venture capital. Okay, so we're looking a lot at the management team. That being said, if you have a kick-ass idea and you're an amazing person, please come and see me, because I'd still love to hear from you. Stage adjusted essentially means If you're a seed stage company, if you're very early, just getting started, you don't have to have a complete management team. You only need to have one person. Okay? You can be the founder, and then the venture capital firm, the seed venture capital firm, make sure that you've picked the right types of VCs to target, will help you build out your management team. Okay? And then willing to share, that's share with employees, share with investors. You know, a piece of the pie, you will finish with a piece of the pie as opposed to the whole pie. Okay? We believe that you need to share equity with everybody who's involved in your company. Okay, so your employees absolutely should have stock options, because if they have a piece of the pie, they're going to work a lot harder and they're going to care a lot more about the success of your company. All of the employees at our companies have stock options, and it's just something that we fundamentally believe in. You have potential customers identified and engaged. Okay, that comes back to that whole concept of we want you to be out there, we want you to be talking to customers, we want you to tell us about your customer interactions when you come in and pitch us. Okay? I have developed this fantastic technology, and I know it's fantastic because I've talked to this company and this company and this company, and look, here are my purchase orders. I'm ready to go. All I need is a bit of cash to get this thing built. It's a proof point for us. Mitigating market risk is what that does. A large market size, again, we talked about market size and making sure that your market is big enough. Target a big market if you're wanting to go for venture capital. And then also understanding the real market. So a lot of people will say this is $1 billion market, and if I only get 1% of this market, then I'm going to make $1 gazillion. Maybe not. My math is a little off there. However, I shouldn't make jokes like that in a room full of probably a lot of math students. But you want to segment your market. Okay, so you're probably not addressing the $1 billion market. Your product probably addresses a segment of that market. So really understand who your target audience is and try and whittle the numbers down to figure out how big that market is. Okay, and you can also come at it from the bottom up. You know, how many technology companies are in Waterloo region that might need some kind of human resources solution, because I'm developing a human resources software platform for companies that are based in Waterloo region. You know, you can look at how many companies there are, how many are big enough to need a human resources solution, and then figure out what percentage of those might buy your software, and then work your way up to a number. So work down, work up. Make sure you understand your segmented market. And then intellectual property. I don't know how much time you have spent on patents and intellectual property, but the most important thing at this stage of your company's development is to make sure that every single person that touches your company has signed an IP release form. Okay, so this is something that's incredibly important in Velocity. I've talked to Sean about this before, so if he hasn't talked to you about this, kick him.
Miller Thompson's coming in.
Perfect. Perfect. So in terms of IP issues, and we've, pardon?
Don't kick me.
I won't kick you. Don't kick Sean. That was horrible to say. What happens is, and especially in the University of Waterloo, where everything is inventor-owned, is that anybody who touches your company and your product becomes an inventor, right? So they've contributed to your product. So when you sell your company for $1 gazillion, if you haven't had everyone sign an IP release form that actually works on your company or your product, they can put up their hands and say, yeah, I worked on that, where's my piece? Okay, so you can say, well, you signed this IP release form, you signed your contribution over to the company, and here's the compensation I gave you for it then. You now no longer own a piece of it. I have the piece of paper that says that you don't. Therefore, you don't get a piece because you only spent a half an hour with me, and I've spent 6 years of my blood, sweat, and tears on this company. Okay, so making sure you have those IP release forms are incredibly important. Keep them all together in a binder, on your server, in a fireproof safe. Don't lose them. Very important. And then the defensibility. In the wireless space, in the mobile space, defensibility of your product is pretty important. In the social media web space, defensibility is less important. It's more time to market and how fast you can get your product to market and how fast you can build your community of users and how fast you can start generating money from that. So defensibility is a bit of a shifting term. It depends on the industry sector that you're getting into, whether or not patents are actually important. Although I'm sure Miller Thompson will say that patents are important right across the board. VCs don't always care about patents. That's a myth. Okay? We sometimes care about them, we sometimes don't care about them. Exit strategy, we think about potential acquirers of your company. So when you're pitching to us, we may well say to you, who's going to buy your company in 7 years? Who's going to buy your company in 4 years? We want to know that there are companies out there who are going to be interested in the technology that you've developed. Because ultimately, we're looking to sell your company and we're looking to return the capital to our investors. Okay? So you have to be comfortable with that concept. We also will be returning capital to you. You will be returning capital to yourselves, hopefully, through the whole process. So we're not taking it all, hopefully. Okay, so really think about the type of entrepreneur that you are. How am I doing for time? Okay. 22? Okay. Think about the type of entrepreneur that you are. Okay, are you an entrepreneur that will happily work with venture capital firms, or are you a lifestyle entrepreneur? Do you want to be a lifestyle entrepreneur working in your company, head of your company, running your company by yourself, making all of the decisions, funding it yourself through revenues or through bank debt, that kind of thing? Or are you happy with a smaller piece of a bigger pie potentially? Okay, do you want a VC to get involved and provide resources and their expertise and their knowledge? You make money once the company gets sold, so the company will not be yours forever. Okay, so you need to think carefully about whether or not venture capital is the direction you want to go. So if you still want to be running the company in 15 years, lifestyle entrepreneur. You want to learn by doing, lifestyle entrepreneur. If you're happy to defer to people when you don't know what to do, okay, so these people could be your CFO, your VP marketing, okay, but you're willing to bring people in with the skill sets that you don't have. And you know what you don't know, and you're comfortable that there are things that you don't know, and you're willing to bring people in to fill out your management team, then you're more appropriate for venture capital. So what we do day to day, if you're ever wondering what we do in our offices, we do 3 primary things. We invest in companies, and so that involves going out, networking in the community, talking to you guys, making sure you know who we are, addressing any questions, concerns you have, evaluating opportunities. So people send us opportunities, we read through them, we think about them, we decide whether or not it's an opportunity that we want to pursue. Some of them we can quickly say, yep, not our mandate, and we decline them very quickly. Others will take some time and we'll do some due diligence. Sometimes due diligence can take 6 months. Sometimes, I mean, how long did we work with you guys before we invested? A while. A while, yeah. So we may really like a team and we may really want to back a company, but it takes us a while to get our heads around the market opportunity. And so we'll take our time. I mean, we'll be working hard at it, but it'll take us some time to understand, because you are the market expert. You are essentially, through the due diligence process, making us as comfortable with the opportunity as you already are. Okay, because we have a bit of a learning curve to get to where you are. And we'll never be as much of an expert on your space as you are. We're comfortable with that. That's why we invest in you. And then we also work through, we negotiate, we do deals with entrepreneurs. Then we work with portfolio companies. So this is something that we take very seriously at Tech Capital. We work very closely with our portfolio companies all the way through. Sandvine we worked with for 6 years, right? We helped negotiate the IPO. Other companies, Serific Wireless was just acquired by a company called Icira. We've been invested in Serific for 9 years, even though our company's only been around for 7 years. So we've, prior fund, you're looking at me suspiciously. So we put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into our portfolio companies as well. And then fundraising. So every 4 years, there's a venture capital cycle. Every 4 years, venture capital firms have to go back to their limited partners and say, see what we've done? Can we have some more money? And it's a lot more painful than when entrepreneurs pitch to us. Due diligence in working with a venture capital firm is about 6 months, give or take. It takes a year and a half minimum, if not longer, to raise money from a limited partner. And it's incredibly painful. And there are even fewer limited partners than there are venture capital firms. And so we do spend time about once every 4 years working very hard to raise another fund. And that's so that we have another bucket of money that we can then deploy out into the community. Any questions? Paused all? Yes?
So you're familiar, I'm sure, with BlackBerry Partners Fund?
Yep. Yep.
How would their objectives and mandates differ from yours, and how would that affect the funding relationship?
Objectives and mandates, so the iFund is completely separate from Apple. So it's Kleiner Perkins, they've taken part of their money and they've allocated it to applications for iPhone. So they've just decided that we're going to take some money and we're going to invest in iPhone applications. Okay, so they don't have the same type of mandate as a BlackBerry fund, which is linked to RIM, which is very specifically looking to build things that will run on BlackBerry. And I think they would be more compelled to invest in opportunities that are very specifically BlackBerry, and then you'll also have that tie into RIM. So
does that affect like how they're looking to exit? Like, is it more they're trying to build BlackBerry versus successfully exit, or how is
potentially. And whenever you work with a strategic financing partner, you need to think about that, and you need to make sure that the deal is structured so that they can't get in the way of an acquisition by Apple, right? So if you take money from BlackBerry Fund, you need to make sure that if you develop an application that runs on BlackBerry and on the iPhone, if Apple comes along and says, I want to buy this application, that because BlackBerry Fund is an investor, they can't get in the way, right? They don't have a veto over you being acquired by some other mobile vendor. Okay, so strategic financing folks can be amazing though, because they can give you access to market. They can open up their sales channels. They can put your application on all their devices before they get shipped. They can, there are a lot of benefits as well. So you sort of weigh the pros and the cons when you're working with a strategic financial partner. And BlackBerry Fund is somewhat removed, right? Like it's not a RIM fund. They do have other LPs in that fund. So I haven't seen a term sheet yet from BlackBerry Fund, so I don't know what the deal parameters are, what kinds of things they look for. Anything else?
Mention Rick Siegel from the BlackBerry Partners Fund will be here on Tuesday.
You can ask Rick, and he will be frank. He will be very frank. He's a hoot. Okay, so here's the venture capital process. If you want to go down this path, get introduced by someone like Sean, or come up and introduce yourselves in a forum like this. But if you have someone who can introduce you and vouch for who you are, it's always a little bit of a warmer introduction, and we feel guilt. Now, if one of our friends refers an entrepreneur, even if we think that the deal is really not for us, we'll spend more time on it just to make sure so that when our friend asks for feedback, we can actually provide real feedback. Okay, so if you can mitigate your own risk by getting introduced by someone that we have a lot of respect for, then that gets you even farther in the door. It's not a cold introduction. At this point, for the initial pitch, we're looking to hear about the technology, the market opportunity, and the team. So if you're pitching tech capital, send us an email with those 3 things, 3 paragraphs. It doesn't have to be more than that. We don't ask for a full business plan. We just want to get a basic idea of what it is you're working on, and that'll give us an idea of whether or not it actually fits with our mandate. And then from that point, if we're interested further, we'll ask for you to come in for a meeting. And then at that point, 10 slides, just giving us a little bit more information is all we need. Again, we do not need a full business plan. We never need a full business plan. We just want to get a sense for the market opportunity, and then we'll start digging in on the due diligence, and we'll send you questions. You answer the questions. We'll do our own research. We'll come back with more questions, and it's just this back and forth process until we're comfortable enough to put money in the company. So there it says business plan. Ignore that. I just said there's no business plan. There can be, if you have a business plan, you can send us your business plan. But don't spend extra time putting one together if you don't have one. Introductory meeting, again, looking at things like the defensibility of the technology, your sales pipeline, if you have a sales pipeline, if you've talked to anybody already, how much you think it's going to cost you to build this company over a year, 2 years, how much money you think you're going to need, and then some due diligence on the team. The big elephant, and then the term sheet. VCs present the term sheet anywhere throughout this process. So if it's an incredibly competitive market and they want to lock you down and they want to make sure that they're the only VC that's looking at you, they might issue the term sheet here. That does not happen these days. Okay? The financial environment is not competitive at all. There are a lot more deals than there is cash. And so people are not feeling pressure to issue term sheets early in the process. If a VC is interested in your company, you'll more likely see a term sheet through the back end of the due diligence process. So it's a little bit painful. You can talk deal terms earlier. You can say, what can I expect a deal to look like? I want to make sure that the deal is compelling enough for me to invest the time in working through this due diligence process with you. Let's make sure we're on the same page from a financial perspective. I think VCs would be very happy to tell you that kind of information, but you wouldn't actually get the document that says, we will invest in your company on these terms until probably after due diligence at this point. And other things that we think about, and we think about these things a lot these days. How much time and money is it going to take us to reach the next milestone? And these days, we think about how much time and money is it going to take us to get all the way through the process and exit. Okay, because right now what's happening is we'll invest in a company, and then when we get to the Series A stage, we look around, and there's not a lot of money out there, so then we invest at the Series A stage by ourselves. We get to Series B, and we look around, and again, there isn't a lot of venture capital out there. So we sometimes need to carry the company all the way through. So the company either, if tech capital is going to invest in the company on its own, the company needs to be built to a point at which it can exit on less than $9 million. We have a $9 million cap on any one of our investments. If the company is going to take $30 million to get to cash flow positive, then we need to find 2 or 3 more investors at the beginning to sign in at the very beginning of the process that they are going to invest alongside, because we do not want to build a pier, we want to build a bridge to an exit, right? And we would hate for a company to work for 2 years and then be chopped off at the knees because it just can't raise any more money, okay? So how many rounds is it going to take? Who else might be interested in this investment? We send it around to our VC friends. We get a very quick read on whether or not people are interested, and then if they are, we all dig in together, and we try to minimize our impact on your business with our due diligence process. We try to bring everything together so that you have one point of contact and you're not being bombarded by 3 or 4 different venture capital firms who are breathing down your neck through the process. Okay, so doing the deal, make sure you understand all of the terms in your deal docs, in your term sheet before you sign it. Okay, there's a lot of information on the internet right now. Take it to a lawyer, have it reviewed. Just make sure you understand it, because it's not that one VC might say to you, yeah, your company today is worth $2 million. The next VC might say, your company today is worth $4 million. This VC gives you a common share. This VC gives you a preferred share with a 10 times liquidation preference. Okay? This deal is going to be way better for you. Okay? So you need to really look at the deal terms, crunch the numbers, figure out which deal works best for you, figure out which VC you think you would work best with. Although these days, the chance of getting competitive term sheets are pretty low. But by the time you guys are launching your businesses, I bet it's going to be super competitive again, so you need to know these things. Oh, pre-money and post-money. Ooh, I knew I was going to do that at least once. Pre-money and post-money. When they tell you your valuation, make sure you understand if it's a pre-money valuation or a post-money valuation. Pre-money valuation is the value of your company today. Post-money valuation is the value of your company plus the money that goes in from the VC. Okay, so a $2 million pre-money plus a $2 million investment is a $4 million post-money. Okay? And your goal is to build it with each subsequent financing round. So if you finished with a $4 million valuation after your first round, so $2 million pre, $2 million in, $4 million, for your next round, you want to be $5 million pre. Okay? Otherwise, you suffer significant dilution on your own equity. Okay, so you have to build the company over a year or 2 up to $5 million. And when we say it's $2 million, it's really 0. Okay, but we're going to give you the $2 million just to make sure that you get some equity, right? But you haven't sold anything and you have goo on a bench. So it's not really worth $2 million. So you have to build really from 0 to $5 million in a year or 2. All right, questions to ask VCs. When you meet with VCs, these are some good questions to ask. Are you actively investing, or are you wasting my time by having me in for this meeting? Okay, so I told you about that VC cycle every 4 years. So we get our money, we then invest it over 5 years, and then we have 5 years to manage those companies to exit. Okay, so we raised our fund in 2005. That means we have an active investment cycle until 2010, and then we have another 5 years to exit those companies. But through that process, we're also raising another fund. Okay, so you want to make sure that the VC that you're talking to has money to do a new investment. So Tech Capital right now, we have 8 active portfolio companies, and we've made 8 investments, 10 active portfolio companies, and we've made 8 investments in our new fund. It's a $60 million fund. Okay, so you can do the math. We allocate $9 million for each investment. We're already over our cap. Okay, but the way we look at it is we look at each portfolio company, we figure out how much money we think each portfolio company is going to take to get to cash flow positive, and then we work it out in terms of how many deals we think we can do. So if you do the math within our fund, we have room for sure for one more investment, and we might have room for another based on how our portfolio performs. So we might have a couple of wildly successful exits, we might have a couple of okay exits, and we might have a couple of companies that we end up shutting down. So depending on how those companies play out, we may or may not have those allocated resources back to invest in other companies. At what stage do you typically invest? A lot of VCs will tell you that they invest at the seed and early stages, but they don't really. They really only invest once you have significant revenues. Okay, so the US VCs are notorious for this. They say they're early stage seed investors, and they are if the company's right down the street. Okay, but if you're in Canada, they're really looking for that financial risk to be mitigated a lot more. How much do you typically invest and how much of the company do you typically take? Okay, so again, depends on the type of opportunity, depends on how much money you think you need, and then how much value you attribute to the company initially from the get-go. So we used to say, for Tech Capital, we typically invest about $2 million on the first round, and we value your company at about $2 million, so it's about 50-50. But I've seen splits 30%, I've seen splits 60%. It's sort of within that range. How long does it typically take to complete due diligence, and what can we expect through this process? So there's a pretty rigid structure for working through the due diligence process. They can give you some sense of how quickly they expect you to work through that. How active are you post-investment? What are the types of resources that you bring to the table? And what experience do you have in this industry? Have you invested in companies like mine before? Do you have access to markets? Do you know strategic partners? Do you have a Rolodex of contacts that you can call and help me, get access to customers? And those are very important questions to ask VCs. And again, it should be specific for your industry. They might be able to call, Donald Trump, but if you're not in real estate, do you really care? Okay? Maybe. VC secrets. Canada's very small when it comes to venture capital. Actually, the world is very small when it comes to venture capital. We all know each other, and if we don't know each other, it's very easy to get to know each other. You just pick up the phone and call, and it's a very incestuous type industry. A VC moves from one firm to the next firm to the next firm. They do deals together. We all know each other from doing deals together. So be careful about the VCs that you target, because very quickly you'll be known as the guy who's called every VC in Canada and the US. Or girl, I should say. There are some women in the room, which is very exciting. So not used to that. VCs don't like to be second, so pick your first VC carefully, or your first few VCs carefully, because typically what we do is we think your deal's interesting. We say, who else have you talked to? You say, well, we've talked to BlackBerry Fund, and we've talked to Innovia Capital in Montreal, and we say, oh, awesome, we know those guys, we'll give them a shout. So one, if you haven't talked to them, don't tell us that you've talked to them. And if you have talked to them, be comfortable that we're going to pick up the phone and call them and say, hey, I just saw this awesome company, Velocity. One of the students at Velocity has this great idea. I heard you've seen it. What do you think? And if they say, oh, really awesome, we'll say, okay, you want to work on the deal together. Because every VC wants to be syndicating right now, more now than I have ever seen. So if you can get a few VCs working together, that is good. Or alternatively, they'll say, yeah, I can't believe you're really considering it. Are you really considering it? And we'll say, well, no, of course I'm not. I just wanted to laugh about it. No. I'm calling you because it was really funny. Yeah. No. Market dynamics are interesting at the moment. That's the whole economy. The economy is lovely. We'll work through this. It's very cyclical. The financial markets go through these ebbs and flows. We're going to come out the other side. And probably by the time all of you guys graduate, it's going to be good times again. So keep working. Another thing we really like to do is meet with people early. So before you're looking for capital, before you launch your company, come in, introduce yourselves to us, tell us about what you're working on, tell us about what you care about. Work for some of our portfolio companies, whether it be on co-op work terms, or once you've graduated, come work for them for a couple of years. We'll get to know you through, we do foosball tournaments and employee kid Christmas parties and things like that. So we get to know the employees at our portfolio companies and get to know us. And we're very happy to give you our thoughts and our advice, even if you're not looking for capital. So if you want someone safe to come and talk to, pre-financing, we're very happy to do that. So just give us a shout. And do it before you spend 5 years working on your concept. Yes?
So what's the percentage of the company actually fund that constitution?
So some numbers. So metric-wise, it really depends on the opportunity. So if a company is looking for $250,000, they will probably end up with more equity for the founders than if a company is looking for $3-4 million, because we take more risk in putting out more capital. So a company that we put $250,000 in, it might be 20% for tech capital, 80% for the founders. I mean, it depends on the team, it depends on the opportunity, the technology. A company that's looking for a lot more money than that, it might be more like 50-50, 50%, 50%. But on exit, I mean, you really need to think about the whole process, right? Because that's just your first round of financing. Then you need to build your company to the point at which you're able to raise more financing. And at that next round, you look at the value, and then it gets chopped up. The new VC gets 40%, let's say. Tech capital then gets 30%, and you have 30%. Okay, and then at the next round, so everybody gets diluted all the way through, and at the end, a founder, typically in a venture-backed company, is like in the 2 to 10% range of the company, but you might sell your company for $500 million, right? So now you might sell your company for $5 million, right? And then if you have preferred shares, then if you have an overhang of $5 million and you sell your company for $5 million, then the VC gets the $5 million and you get nothing. And you might get a couple of the old computers, right? So you need to think about how much money you think the company is going to take to get to cash flow positive, to start generating revenues on its own, to the point at which it doesn't need to raise external financing anymore. Work it back, think about equity distribution, but really, your company is worth what somebody is going to pay for it, right? So don't ever price your own deal. Don't ever, 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 ever go into a VC and say, I think my valuation should be $5 million, and you're going to get a return of 18% over the next 10 years, and I'm going to pay you a dividend, and that's the way it's going to be. Because they'll just say, why are they pricing their own deal? I was going to give them a $10 million pre-money valuation. They just asked for 5, okay, woohoo, right? What a deal. So let the VC price it for you, and then see if it's something that you can work with. Or if you have other alternatives. You want to look at all your financing alternatives and pick the one that fits best for you. Any other questions? Yeah?
I would assume that the profit model or some realistic way to generate cash is pretty important for a VC. But if you look at something like Facebook or Twitter or even YouTube, they haven't really generated profits yet, or even their potential for generating profits is questionable. Yet they have all this investment.
And they have billion-dollar valuations, right?
Yeah, so how does that happen?
The Web 2.0 world is a very interesting world. And I love Facebook, and I love Twitter, and I love all of those things. So it's an area that I've spent a lot of time on. Again, a company is worth what people are going to pay for it, right? So a VC will look at Facebook and will say, wow, this really looks like it's becoming a new platform. And it really has a ton of users. And there's value in those users. There's value in those eyeballs, and I hate to use that word. But They've got this interesting advertising platform. They've got this good group of users, and it's continuing to grow. And at some point, they're either going to go public because they're going to be able to generate some revenues by flicking a switch and all of a sudden having a ton of revenues, or they're going to get acquired by someone for a significant amount of money because they have value, right? They have content, they have users, and they've sort of locked them in, right? Because people's content is on Facebook. You can't get it out very easily, right? So there's absolutely value in that. It's difficult to build a Facebook or a Twitter because nobody knows what makes a Facebook or a Twitter, right? Is it first to market? Not always. Is it, you somehow influence one significant person who starts talking about it like crazy and all of a sudden it has this viral, growth? Absolutely, right? And who knows where the viral growth is coming from? There are a lot of people who are studying viral growth. And if any of you figure it out, please let me know, because I'd really like to know the secret, because I have a few companies that could use it. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting world out there right now. The cool thing about the stuff in the Web 2.0 space is it doesn't take a lot of money to build, right? So you can build a prototype, you can kick it out the door, and you can do some marketing, and you can see if it goes. And if it doesn't go, you can shut it off. And if it does go, then you almost have more problems, right? But hopefully at that point you have some people who will finance the back end and really help it stay stable. And if it's not stable and people still love it, then it's okay, right?
I think you have to go to 2.
Yeah, it's okay. It's at 2 now?
It's after 2.
Okay, one more question. Yeah, go ahead.
Are investors concerned with the lack of IP in like Web 2.0?
No.
No?
Nope, definitely not.
What was the question?
Are investors concerned about lack of IP? Web 2.0 is not about IP. It's just not. There's so much copycat stuff going on. It's all about making it viral, getting the numbers up, getting to market quickly, being innovative, not sleeping, that kind of thing. You had a question too, right? Go ahead.
Yeah, if you have an idea that like inside meets intellectual property protection, like what stage would you pursue that? Like before you got a VC, or would VC be interested in funding like a patent application?
Yeah, a VC will, if they think your idea is compelling, they'll give you money to patent it.
And what precautions or like what do you have to do to protect that IP when you're talking to students?
Nothing. Because VCs don't build their own companies. Now, in the Valley, I've heard rumors of VCs listening to your idea, then getting off the phone and calling some of their friends who are experts in that space and starting the company and doing it on their own. I don't know who they are, and I have never had anybody point to a real example of that, but I've heard rumors of that happening. It doesn't happen here. I mean, we aren't you guys. I mean, we don't have your depth of knowledge in the spaces in which you guys are, and we would be investing in you, not in building a replica of whatever it is you've developed.
Quick clarification, would you ever talk about your portfolio companies and maybe a parallel market about how this technology might apply to their company?
So the question was, would we ever talk to a portfolio company in a parallel market? If someone were to come in and pitch to us a concept that's very similar to what one of our portfolio companies is doing, would we then tell our portfolio companies? And no, we would not. I mean, that's just unethical. If we burn our bridges, like if word gets out that we're disclosing confidential information that's been given to us, I mean, you guys are our bread and butter. We'd be dead in the water. So we're pretty careful about confidential information. We don't share unless you give us permission. Like if you start talking about something that we think is competitive, we'll say, hey, wait, before you go any further, do you know about our portfolio company, yada, yada, yada? If you do, if you don't, go find out about them, and then, if it's not competitive, if you don't think it's competitive, come back and talk to us. If you do think it's competitive, don't talk to us, just because we don't want that, the onus to be on ourselves. But we're also happy to introduce you. Like there was one guy that I was talking to a couple weeks ago, and I said, this is really similar to what one of our other portfolio companies is working on. Can I connect the two of you, have you guys talk to each other, and then you guys figure out if it's competitive, and if you think it is, then we just won't pursue it. But if you don't think it is, then we'll talk some more, because it's interesting. What you're working on is interesting. We're interested in it. So, but it's close, yeah. So, and then they got the industry introduction anyways, and they're now working together. The two companies are working together. So, all right, I do need to go. If you have more questions, business card, call me, email me, Facebook me, follow me on Twitter. I'll follow you back.
Thanks very much, Jacqui. I know you have to leave, but